So I'm seeing guys are here. Karibuni sana. Hope everyone is well. Good to see you guys back in for another episode of the Weekly Swing. Hope you had a good time on the chat last week. Let's see if we get some good opportunities this week. For the sake of guys who are new here, John is my name. I'm trader at Afriforex. I'm joined here alongside Mitch. What's good?
I'm good. Had a good weekend at least. But now it's back to the grind. So please, hopefully there will be some nice opportunities this week.
Right. Good stuff. Let's see what the chats will have to offer. So guys, remember, if you do have any questions, feel free to ask both on the Q&A section and on the chat box. The team is also here. We do have Naomi. She's working in the back office. So in case you do have any queries or anything you want us to repeat, make sure that you send that in. But we most prefer that you do it on the Q&A section. So at least you can end up having a look at those questions towards the tail end of this webinar. And of course, for the guys who are going to be watching this on YouTube, make sure that you like and subscribe, and make sure that you also turn on the bell notification so that you get notifications when you do end up uploading new stuff. So I guess we can get started. Mitch, over to you.
So as usual, we have our weekly watch list. So you can see there's a difference between what we had last week and what we do have this week. So last week, we're looking for selling opportunities on the Australian dollar and the Canadian dollar, and buying opportunities on the British pound and the Swiss franc. But you can see a few things have changed, where right now have the US dollar. You can see the last week it was a -2. Right now it's a -7, so it's showing a lot of weakness. A lot of that weakness came in due to the CPI news that came out last week on Wednesday. However, we also have the Canadian dollar, which is also showing us weakness. It's a -5. It's still showing us weakness last week, but that weakness does seem to be reducing. And we do have the Swiss franc, where it was a 4, meaning we were looking for buying opportunities, but right now we can clearly see that it is very strong, showing strength against every other currency pair. So our focus will be on those 3 pairs, but usual, we'll mix and match them with the other pairs that are neutral. So the US dollar will mix and match it with all these pairs, do the same with the Canadian dollar, then the Swiss franc, as well as looking at gold and the US 30. So I guess we can start off, but as usual, we'll start off with a review of what we did have last week. So you can be constantly, okay, at least I will be coming back towards this watch list, so you can be able to take a screenshot of it later if you have not yet already. So we'll start off with the review pairs. So we'll start off with the euro against the Australian dollar. Remember, on this kind of pair, our bias was to look for buying opportunities. We did point out these 3 areas. We also did mention that the fact that the price did not necessarily react from this area, it could be within a range. And you can clearly see the price did manage to come down, did bounce off this area attempting to come up, where you did see some sort of reaction, but afterwards you can see the price managed to continue coming down lower, came back towards the buyer's area. You can see there was a nice pin bar right there. The market did continue going up to the upside. Now, this was on Thursday. So you can see sometimes the markets, most of the time, usually do move around Tuesdays or Wednesdays, but sometimes you can see in certain situations, the markets do end up waiting till Thursday before the move ends up happening. But unfortunately for us, this is a pair that we're not going to be looking at this week. Now, the next week pair for review, we did have the Australian dollar against the Japanese yen. Remember, on this kind of pair, our bias was to look for selling opportunities. Now, we did have these 3 areas, and initially, the price did look as if it was breaking this area to the downside, but it was within this buyer's area. We did want to see whether or not the price was actually going to either hold below or come up to the upside within this area if it did end up giving us a probe. But you can see the price did end up reaching to the downside, pulling back. In this case, this happened on Tuesday, where the market did manage to actually start coming down lower. Until during the week, around Wednesday, that's when it did end up giving us more of a pullback. So this trade only worked out at the beginning of the week. Later during the week, the market did end up giving us a pullback. It had something to do with the Australian dollar also showing us a bit of strength and the yen showing us a bit of weakness. And that's the reason why this pair is off our watch list for today. Now, the next pair we did have for review was the Australian dollar against the New Zealand dollar. On this kind of pair, the bias here was to look for selling opportunities. Now, we did have these 3 areas. You can see these 3 areas highlighted. But we had pointed out that there was some bias area right here where the market did seem to be holding. And you can see at that point in time, the price was within that area. So we did not know how those buyers were going to react, whether or not we're going to get a much deeper pullback coming all the way up here, or getting the price to actually hold, giving us some sort of probe. And you can see the probe did end up happening, but it took a long time. Because you can see the price did take a while before it did manage to go to the upside on Wednesday. around Wednesday, similar situation. You can see the market times that we always point out, 10, 3, and 4:30. The markets also moved within those specific times. So you can see on Wednesday at 4 o'clock, that's when the selling opportunity started, giving us the probe, gave us a pullback, and you can see the market didn't manage to continue coming down. Similar situation on Friday. But this buyer's area, they seem to be continuously holding the market. The price hasn't necessarily gone down that much further. And there's also another reason why this pair is going to be off our watch list for this week. Now, the next pair we did have for review was the US dollar against the Canadian dollar. We're meant to be looking for buying opportunities on this kind of pair. Remember, the price, when we were looking at it earlier during the week, last week, was within this particular area right here. So the price did end up actually breaching this area to the downside and holding below. Initially wanted to see whether or not the price is actually going to hold above, but the fact that it fell below, wanted to see how it was going to react in this next problem area. But unfortunately, the trade did not work out. For those of you who were there during the Wednesday live trading session, we were looking for this as a trading opportunity. And you can see this blue line that we did have here. There were some sellers holding within that particular area, and we did want to see whether or not the price was actually going to be able to break that area to the upside. You can see the price managed to actually come down lower. That news event that did come out, bringing in a lot of US dollar weakness, did bring this price down lower. And you can see later on, it seems on Friday, that's when the price started coming up. But the fact that it had already reached this area to the downside would have been very risky to look for such a buying opportunity. So unfortunately, it did fall off our watch list, even though the trading opportunity did work out later on during the week. Now, the next pair we did have was the euro against the British pound. In this pair, our bias was to look for selling opportunities. And you can see the first area that we did have within this particular location. Market did end up starting to react, in fact, on Monday. Most pairs don't necessarily move that much on Monday, but it seems this pair did work out, giving us a probe. And you can see the market did manage to try to come down lower. But this bias area that we did have, you can see we did mention, once we do get the price breaching, we want to see whether or not the price is actually going to hold below. But you can see when the price came down, it came straight back in, making this a probe. And you can see with probes, if the price came down, it just tested this area before it's attempting to go back up to the upside. So unfortunately, similar situation, this is a pair that's going to be off our watch list for today, or at least for this week. Now, the next pair we did have was the British pound against the Japanese yen. On this kind of pair, our bias was to look for buying opportunities. And you can see we did have these three areas. Now, initially, at the beginning of the week, the price was within this particular location, coming back down towards this buyer's area. We wanted to see whether or not these buyers were going to react, or if the price was actually going to hold below. You can see in this situation, the price came down, holding below to the downside. So at that point in time, no buying opportunity just yet. The price managed to come all the way down towards this particular area. I think we were looking at this during the live trading session on Thursday. Did point out that there could be a buying opportunity, and we did set up such a particular trade, saying that once the price did go to the upside, we did need a pullback, possibly come back within the support and resistance area, having a stop loss here before we could end up taking the trade. And you can see this trade did work out. The price did manage to come back here on Friday at around 4 o'clock in the morning. So that was during the Asian session. And the price did manage to come up to the upside. But you can see these problem areas that we do point out that you do need to make sure you manage your trade. You can see this area has definitely given us issues, where it has even given us a probe right here, not necessarily being able to reach this area to the upside. So unfortunately, we're not necessarily too sure if this price might end up continuing to go up higher, might end up entering into some sort of range. And that's the reason why this pair is off our watch list for today. Now, moving on to the next review pair, we did have the British pound against the New Zealand dollar. Now, it seems a number of British pound pairs did start working out actually from Monday. Similar situation with the euro against the British pound that we did see. But in this case, you can see on Monday at 4 o'clock during the US session open, the price did manage to come back down, hold within this particular buyer's area, and did give us a buying opportunity to take it to the upside. But unfortunately, during Wednesday, or at least Wednesday midweek, once the CPI fundamentals did come out, you can see how aggressive the sellers managed to come down, but it still managed to get all the way to the buyer's area. You can see the market did slow down and is attempting to go up higher. But based on the fact that how aggressive these sellers came in, there's a risk that this trade might not necessarily work out. It might continue entering this particular rate, just bouncing between these two levels. So unfortunately, this is a pair that's going to be off our watch list for this week. Now, last but not least, for the review pairs, we did have the US dollar against Swiss franc. Now, in this kind of pair, our bias here was to look for selling opportunities. Now, you can see how aggressive and how far this market did manage to come down lower. Now, when certain situations happen, it usually happens when one pair is showing a lot of weakness and another pair is showing a lot of strength. We did see that the US dollar did become very weak, and the Swiss franc was also showing us a lot of strength. And you can see we were hoping to see a pullback coming in, Unfortunately, the market never pulled back and they just continued to come down lower. Unfortunately, not necessarily giving us much of a pullback. And that's what usually happens when you mix a strong pair and a weak pair. That's mainly the reason why, even on our watch list, you don't see us mixing the sell with the pairs on the buy side, because you can see the US dollar against the Swiss franc, and even possibly, I don't necessarily think we had the Canadian dollar against the Swiss franc, but possibly if you look at it, it's a similar situation. You can't see hardly any pullbacks as the price was coming down. So that's the reason why mixing those two pairs, for at least a strong and a weak pair, is not necessarily the best, because we always need some sort of pullback for us to look for those trading opportunities. So that's it for all the review pairs. As you can see, we've looked at the pairs that we did have last week. So right now we're going to focus on this week's pairs. So we'll have a look at gold and the US 30 before we do start having a look at the currency pairs that we're going to be looking at this week. So John, just can take it away on gold.
All right. So lots of moves on the charts last week. Let's see and hope this week also going to get some major moves on the charts. So for gold last week, we're basically watching out to see whether we could have gotten some selling opportunities. And you can see the three areas that we had pointed out last week and what we were expecting. But unfortunately, we couldn't get any selling opportunities per se, because you can see that within this area, we couldn't really get a slowdown of the buyers and the big sellers coming in. Similar situation with this region at the top right here. Lots of weakness, I think, on the USD that we did end up seeing. However, nonetheless, this week we're still going to be watching out to see whether we can get selling opportunities. So you can see the three regions that we've mapped out for this week that have been highlighted right there. So we're still going to be looking for selling opportunities. I know it may seem a bit odd, but we are more or less still within a seller's region. We're not yet broken above this region per se, like what you'd expect in terms of looking for the buying opportunities. Because we can't see that the market has just broken. It's more or less just holding within this particular region right here. So unless we get a proper breach of this area to the upside and a nice strong breach, not something whereby the market holds just above this region right here, then maybe we could possibly end up turning into some sort of buyers. So we're going to be watching out to see what happens. Either we could get the market attempting to break this area to the upside, we could get a massive drop. If we do, then potentially we still could be looking for a selling opportunity. So we could be expecting that. On the other hand, I think if the market actually breaks and holds above the red SNR to the upside, so we're more or less within, a defining point where, yes, we're still going to be looking for sales, but we can also end up switching to buyers. So it depends on what happens on the pullback. If the market breaks to the upside, and let's say on the pullback still ends up holding to the upside, then I think at that point in time, we could possibly end up starting to look for those buying opportunities. So we're in a catch-22 situation. But let's wait and see what the market does end up doing somewhere within that particular region right there. But for now, the buyer more or less is still to the downside because of this breach where the market is just holding just above that region. So I hope guys take a note of that. So I think we can move on to the next one, which is the Dow. See what happened on that one. So for this one last week, we were trying to see whether we could have gotten some buying opportunities. And you can see the three regions that we had pointed out. On Monday, price was somewhere within this particular area right here. And I think we're expecting to possibly see if the market was going to come back in within this area for the buys to lift. But consider there was a really nice probe within this region right here where the market actually came back in, just like what expected, tapped in within here. Then after that, you can see that the market did actually end up moving to the upside. If you got your trade here, then you definitely needed to manage your trade somewhere within this region right here. So for this week, the levels are more or less the same. The market seems to be in some sort of a range. So right now, we're just attempting to break above this region to the upside. So what we're going to be expecting is to wait and see what happens. You still could find the market coming back in to the downside if the buyers do end up pushing the market up. And you can see that they came up quite aggressively. I don't know which one was this. I know most of these markets did actually move early in the week. So that was Tuesday.
London, certainly.
Yeah, so if we get the market maybe coming down, possibly coming back up, if we get it holding within here, I think we should be good to go in terms of buys, especially once we get that attempt to come back in and it's unsuccessful. Seems like the market has already done that to some extent within here, but we need to see the slowdown of, the sellers and the aggressive buyers coming in. Alternatively, if the market comes back into the downside, then there's a possibility, especially if it comes in and possibly even struggles within this area to break back up to the upside and it doesn't, and actually comes down, then I think we could be looking for a buying opportunity down within this region. You could find the market possibly doing something similar, or maybe coming back in within regions within here where maybe there are some prices that the big boys possibly need. So we could be finding that the market could possibly end up coming back in within here, then possibly slow down, the sellers, then maybe we could find the buyers working again, still somewhere within this region right here. So could be watching out for that. But also remember the red SNR at the bottom, a long shot, but it's possible price can also end up coming back in within there. The big boys do really need that price. So I guess that's pretty much it for gold and the Dow Jones.
So I think also, John, you did mention we could potentially be in a range, isn't it? On this one.
Yeah. I think on the bigger time frame, I think if you go look at, maybe zoom out to look at the daily, I think you'll see that we're in some sort of a range. So we're bouncing, and based on the 4 hour, you can definitely see this range within here. On the daily, I think it's even bigger. So we're within a key area where we should be expecting sellers to possibly end up fighting back. Okay. If we break to the side, I don't know, where would we be heading since we've gone to the daily, just to have a look at it real quick. We break that region to the upside.
The next problem area seems to be this particular setup. We do have, I think, around that 0.5.
Yeah. All right. So guys can also take note of that. In case we break to the upside, the pullback, definitely watch out for that area there to the next region.
Good. So hope that's clear, at least doing gold and the US 30. So right now, we will be starting off with the US dollar pairs. We'll mix and match them with all the pairs on the neutral side before we look at the Canadian dollar, then move on to the Swiss franc pairs. So we'll start off with the euro against the US dollar. So on this kind of pair, our bias is to look for buying opportunities. You can see the weakness of the US dollar that really did come in. So the fact that we do want to look for buying opportunities, can clearly see it's very obvious to everyone that the price is going up and the buy should be what people are looking for. But as usual, we never want to buy at such a high price. Remember, we always want to try and see if we can potentially end up getting a discount. So the fact that the price has gone up very aggressive and everyone is looking for a buy, I don't think even the big boys necessarily want to buy at such a high price. So hopefully, and you can see even the way the buyers are coming in initially very strong, and right now they do look as if they're weakening. So hopefully you can end up getting that pullback, potentially coming back even within this particular support and resistance area, potentially giving us even some sort of probe, maybe inciting a few more sellers by the time the price looks as if it's going to the downside. And if we do see the price holding above, then we should be able to continue with those buying opportunities. The price can still come all the way to this extreme area. It's not very likely, especially with the huge move that did end up happening. But the price, as long as we're holding above this red SNR, we should be able to still look for those buys. And you can see this is a major support and resistance area that we did breach as we were going to the upside. Now, there is a possibility that the price could end up actually continuing to go to the upside. You might find some euro strength really coming in or some US dollar weakness continuing. So if we do get the price actually breaching this area to the upside, and remember, we want to see a big, strong breach because we at that point in time, we know the buyers are still interested. And once we do get the pullback and the price falls above, then we should be able to continue looking for those buying opportunities on the euro against the US dollar. But for right now, the fact that we're within an area where the sellers, I think it's much better to be patient, wait to see. Because if you think about it, if most people start jumping in on buys right now, then most likely you'll see some sort of probe happening. Most people will jump in on their buys, putting their stop losses below here. Chances are the price will end up coming back downward. So in this situation, it's best to ideally be patient and wait and possibly use some correlation, which we'll end up having a look at as we're looking at the other US dollar pairs. So I hope that's clear on the euro against the US dollar. Right now, if we move on to the next US dollar pair, we do have the British pound against the US dollar. Now, in this kind of pair, our bias here is still to look for buying opportunities. You can see how aggressive the market did manage to go up. We did have this pair for last week looking for buys. And they point out that the British pound did end up starting to move on Tuesday at around during the London session. You can see Tuesday, At least in this case, it was around Monday during the US session. The big boys did come in. Tuesday, the price did manage to continue going to the upside. So unfortunately, hardly any pullbacks. It seems that the British pound was also showing a lot of strength in this pair as well. But this also has something to do with the US dollar weakness, because you can see they do look similar with the euro against the US dollar. So in this situation, our bias here is still to look for buying opportunities. But as usual, we do want to see if we can potentially end up getting some sort of pullback coming in. So this situation, due to the fact that the market has moved quite aggressively, we don't necessarily always have 4 levels, but in this situation, especially when there are huge moves, sometimes it is necessary, because you never know exactly how much of a discount the big boys will need before the price actually ends up going up. Since there are way more levels since the price went up a bigger distance. In this situation right now, we're so close towards the seller's area. Watch out for that correlation that could happen with the US dollar pairs. So if you do see the price managing to come down lower, could come back within this area, could come back down all the way within here. Hopefully, if we end up getting some sort of probe right there, showing us some big boys buyers coming in, because remember, when it gets to the first area, we want to see a big boy buyers going to be interested. Are we going to see aggressive buyers coming in? If we don't see anything within that level, we'll come to the next level. And if we do see something of the sort and the price holding above, then we should be able to look for our buying opportunities. But be aware that the price can still come back down all the way to this buyer's area, because you can see these are the buyers that did manage to push this price up all the way throughout the whole of last week. So as long as we're holding above this red support and resistance area, above this area, we should still be looking for those buying opportunities. Now, similar situation, you could end up still finding this price breaching this area to the upside. Remember, if the US dollar does show a lot of weakness. So if you do see the same thing also on the euro against the US dollar, this area is being breached to the upside and the price is holding above, you can be able to continue looking for those buying opportunities. So I hope that is clear on the British pound against the US dollar. So we'll move on to the next US dollar pair, which is the Australian dollar against the US dollar. Now, in this currency pair, we did have this one last week, but as you can see, our bias was to look for selling opportunities. We did have these 3 areas where we were meant to be looking for those sells. Now, initially, the price was within a buyer's area, and we did want to see whether or not the price is actually going to breach this area, this buyer's area to the downside, and we would have been able to continue looking for those selling opportunities or waiting for some sort of pullback within the seller's area. But you can see the price did manage to break and hold above the support and resistance area that we did have. We wanted to see how the price would react in the next area, but that US dollar weakness did really come in quite aggressively, and you can see the price did manage to continue going up higher, breaking this area to the upside, and it did really fall off our watch list at that point in time. But since this week, our biases have switched, and we can be able to look for buying opportunities on this. So we will be pointing out these 3 areas of interest. So right now, you can see we have a seller's area right here at the top that does seem to be reacting, giving us a pullback, which is definitely what we want to see. We did have this major seller's area that we can see was breached to the upside. And right now, the fact that we're getting a pullback within this area, we'll be very interested to see how the market reacts within that location. But it can still pull back all the way towards this buyer's area. You can see these are the buyers who pushed up higher. So as long as we're holding above this area, the buyers should be to look for buying opportunities. So right now, the objective as the pullback is coming in is to wait to see how far the pullback comes in. Could end up seeing some sort of probe coming in within that particular area. If you see the buyers holding within that location, you should be able to look for buying opportunities. But be aware that if this level doesn't hold, the pullback can still come in throughout the week, where you'll find that the price actually continues coming down lower within this particular area. And if you do see some sort of probe within that area, then we should be able to look for some sort of buying opportunities, especially if we do see the price holding above this location. So just watch out for that. If the price reacts within this particular location and breaks, or at least we can be able to look for the buying opportunities there. If we're able to break this area to the upside, you can see we're within a major seller's area right here, where the seller, the last time that the market was within this area, you can see how far they did manage to come down. So it coming down all the way to here is not something impossible. But if we are able to get the price breaching and holding above, then we should be able to continue looking for those buying opportunities, especially if the price just continues breaching and holding to the upside. So just watch out for that. Right now, wait to see how the pullback comes in. And remember, we always focus on 2 time frames. So you can be able to go to the 1 hour time frame, read how the sellers are coming in, and wait to see the signs of big boy buyers. If the level will react within this area, if not, watch out to see if it will react within this buyer's area down low. So I hope that's clear on the Australian dollar against the US dollar. If we move on to the next US dollar pair, which is the US dollar against the Japanese yen, this is now a brand new entry in our watch list, and you can see that US dollar weakness that really did come in. So overall, our bias here is definitely to look for selling opportunities, but the level, the fact that the prices have really gone through the downside and gone quite aggressively. Ideally, it would not necessarily be a good idea to start looking for your selling opportunities just now. You can see how aggressive the sellers were initially. Right now, in the black of buyers as well. But you can see as the prices come down here, look, and you can see some aggressive buyers are starting to show up. So potentially, we can end up actually getting a pullback within one of these areas that we have pointed out. So right now, you could end up seeing the price giving us some sort of pullback, approaching this area. If you do end up getting some sort of probe, we should be able to look for some selling opportunity within that particular location. But if not, you could end up finding, as we have pointed out, the US dollar weakness could end up continuing to come down low. We'll end up having a look at the fundamentals, but you can see if the price manages to break this area to the downside and fall below, and we want a proper breach where we want not necessarily something very small that doesn't necessarily go that far. We want something that really goes. Remember, don't feel like that is already gone, or at least that the trade has left. Wait for that pullback, because that's now giving you the sign of where you're meant to go. You wait for at least within a good location for you to be able to continue those selling opportunities. But for right now, let's wait to see how the correlation ends up coming in on the US dollar pairs. So moving on to the last US dollar pair we do have, which is the New Zealand dollar against the US dollar. Similar situation, our bias here is to look for buying opportunities. You can see that US dollar weakness that really has come in. So overall, our bias here is definitely to look for those buying opportunities. But as usual, we want a pullback, and we can see a pullback is starting to come in, which is definitely what we want to see. So since we do have these main levels that we have pointed out, main buyers who pushed up are right here. So we do know as long as these buyers, or at least the price is holding above this area, the buyers are still interested, and we should still be looking for those buying opportunities. Right now, the fact that we've approached an area where there are sellers, it's definitely not a good place to look for your buying opportunities just yet. Let's wait to see how this pullback comes in. We do end up getting the pullback, possibly giving us some sort of probe within this area. We should be able to look for some buying opportunities in that location. But be aware the price can still come back down all the way to the extreme area for the buyers. And watch out, because remember, due to the fact that we're focusing on the 4 hour, there are certain levels that are still visible on the 1 hour time frame. You can see there's a certain level here, some sort of resistance area that did also look like a support area. So you might find that this probe that we're looking at might end up just even pulling back all the way to that particular area, bouncing off that area. And if you do see the price holding above, we can be able to look for buying opportunities. But if you do want to watch out within this location, you can be able to look at it on a smaller time frame. If you do see big boy signs, or at least signs of big boy buyers, you could be able to look for your buying opportunities, but you do need to watch out for this problem area, especially if the price holds below. Chances are we could be coming down a bit lower before we're able to look for those buying opportunities. So just watch out for those levels on the New Zealand dollar against the US dollar. So that's it for the US dollar pairs. As you can see, we've mixed and matched the US dollar with all the pairs on the neutral side. So right now, we're going to have a look at the Canadian dollar pairs. So I guess we'll start off with the euro against the Canadian dollar. So John?
All right, so for this one, we're still going to be looking to see whether we can get some buying opportunities. You can see last week the 3 areas that were pointed out where we're expecting. Possibly see the pullback coming in, but unfortunately, it seems that the Canadian dollar last week was extremely weak. You can see that the market within this region right here, we're expecting maybe to break, maybe get some sort of pullback coming in within this region for us to get this buy move going up. But unfortunately, that couldn't happen. We can see that the market just rallied up. So this week, we're still going to be watching out to see whether we can get buys, but we've adjusted the regions, so hopefully we can end up taking note of them. Let's see if we can get some sort of a pullback coming in. Hopefully, if the pullback comes in somewhere as close as possible within this region here, we could try and see whether we could time our buying opportunities to possibly end up going up. So you could be watching out for that. Of course, there's a possibility that the market could come in deeper, maybe all the way to within this region here. But it's a bit of a long shot, but it's still something that's possible. So you could still keep an eye out for that region. But I think on the flip side, maybe Mitch can go up a higher time frame, maybe to the daily, just to see where we could be heading with this. Because if the market breaks above this region with the aggressive buyers, the way they're coming in, I don't know. What do you think? Could be a level maybe somewhere within these regions here? Although maybe that might be far. Maybe somewhere within here. Yeah.
could be a level here because you can see the highest point and seems to be held a bit as a support area. I think that is the next problem area.
All right. So I think if, we can go back to the H4. So I think if the market breaks above this region here, and we need to really see the market, could even end up coming all the way till within there, come back in, attempt to break to the downside, you still could get this buy. Definitely make sure that you manage your trade within that area there, and maybe try and see whether we could end up blasting past that region to the upside. Remember, there's still those levels that we've seen on the daily. So you could find that maybe the buyers could be going up to possibly end up challenging those regions at the top there. So let's see what happens on this one. But definitely, I think the first option will definitely be the better one. If the market gives us this pullback, this one will give us way more risk to reward than trying to squeeze ourselves somewhere at the top. And of course, getting those late buys, because it's also quite obvious right now that, the market is going up. Lots of people across the world, millions of traders are definitely looking for buys on this one. So at least if the market can end up giving us a pullback, incite some sellers to come in, then that's good. At least we'll be in business. So I think we can end up looking at the next one. Hopefully you guys have taken note of that. The next one, the Great British Pound against the Canadian dollar. You can see that also for this one, lots of weakness happening last week, and the market going up in terms of the Canadian dollar weakness. But at least this one is much better. You can see that the market is actually going up in some sort of steps, which means that the market is definitely in some sort of an upward trend. So for this one, we'll be waiting to see whether we can get the market pulling back in. Right now, we're within a seller's region. Don't look for those buying opportunities now. Hopefully, if the market can come back in somewhere within here, then we could look for the buys. Hopefully, something like that. Either that option. Alternatively, also on this one, because if the Canadian dollar doesn't end up showing any signs of strength, because remember that when the pullback is coming in, then that means that there's some strength coming in for the Canadian dollar. If there's no pullback and the Canadian dollar continues to be weak, maybe on the higher time frame, maybe Mitch could just go up there real quick, maybe on the daily, just to see where we could be heading with this. So if it breaks above that region to the upside, seems like there is a region of sellers somewhere within that region, right? Seems like that could be the next area where you could be watching out for. So you can see sellers have worked it off there before, could be heading maybe somewhere within that region there. So just make sure that you also do watch out for that. But you do need a breach the upside. So if you go back to the 4-hour time frame on this one, then what we're expecting is something similar to what we discussed on the other one. Hopefully we get a nice strong breach to the upside. Maybe it might even tap there, come back in, then maybe you could attempt to possibly end up blasting through this region to the upside. And this right here could be your buy, somewhere within that region. So make sure that you do watch out for those 4 areas right there. So I think we can look at the next one, which is the Australian dollar against the Canadian dollar. So this one is also a new entrant on our watch list, but I'm sure guys can see the correlation amongst the card pairs. All of them, the weakness, quite evident. So for this one, similar situation with what we've discussed with the others. Either the market breaks this area to the upside, maybe it could even come tap those sellers there, come back in, attempt to come back in, and it's unsuccessful. Could look for your buying opportunities somewhere within there. All right. On the other hand, the sellers are reacting. It's, of course, because we're more or less within their region or within an SNR. So it's not uncommon. Let's see if they can bring the market down lower. The market comes in within this region, still could look for the buying opportunity somewhere lower within here. And hopefully that option is much better. I think even in terms of risk to reward, that one might give us a much better risk to reward. But make sure that you also watch out for the region at the bottom. It's not uncommon that you could find that the market could be on the pullback phase, maybe for the earlier part of the week. Then you could find that maybe Thursday or Friday, price would possibly be moving off this region at the bottom right here. So just make sure that you also just keep it in your analysis as well. So hopefully that's clear enough for guys of the Australian dollar against the Canadian dollar. So I think we can look at the next one, Canadian dollar.
Just to point out, I think there's also some sort of SNR here that possibly you guys need to also watch out for. Because even if you're watching out for these major ones, there seems to be also a bias area here.
Yeah. More like on the what? The 1 hour time frame, huh?
Yeah.
Could find the market reacting off there as well. All right. So hopefully you guys have taken note of that. So the next one, which is the Canadian dollar against the Japanese yen. So for this one last week, we wanted to see some sales working or coming through. And you can see that they did. You can see the three areas that we had pointed out. On Monday, price was somewhere within here. We wanted to see whether we could get the pullback coming in. Unfortunately, that couldn't happen. The market broke to the downside, but you can see that the Canadian dollar weakness, just like we've seen on the others, was really there. And there wasn't much of a pullback because after the market broke to the downside, we wanted to see whether we could get this pullback to come in. But unfortunately, you needed to read this on a smaller time frame to possibly end up attempting to jump in on those sales, but it just seemed like it just kept running away. So this week, we are still going to be looking to see whether we can get some selling opportunities on this one. So it's either the market breaks to the downside. If we get the market pulling back in after a nice strong reach, then we could resume with the selling opportunities here. Hopefully, it won't be a situation like last week where the market just broke and just ran away. Hopefully, we get the pullback. Then we could potentially end up trying to see where we could target on that one. I don't know what the next level down there could be. So it could be down here. I think we had looked at it maybe in the morning. Huh?
Next level is around here.
Yeah. So could also watch out for that. Maybe if we get a breach, we get a nice sell there, could target down here, but just make sure that you watch out for problem areas where the market could possibly end up stopping and turning. So just make sure that you watch out for that. On the flip side, if the buyers do end up reacting, because you can see that there are some signs of some buyers within this region holding the market and also attempting to move up. If the market does actually end up reacting off this region to the upside, then there's a possibility price could be coming back in within this region here. And if we possibly do end up getting the market coming back in, could watch out for price action signal, watch out for signs of rejection within this region here, pin bars, exhaustion candles basically, and inside bars, probes, most especially. If you find that happening within that region, you could potentially end up getting a really good sell working off that region there. But also remember the red SNR at the top, because the pullback comes in deeper. That's the last area where we will be watching out for our selling opportunities. So hopefully you've taken note of that. And I think we can move on to the last one, which is the New Zealand dollar against the Canadian dollar. So for this one last week, watching out to see whether we could get some buying opportunities. Also quite evident, you can see how weak the Canadian dollar was last week. You can see the three regions that we had pointed out within this particular region right here. And you can see on Monday, price was somewhere within this region. We did want to see the market pull back in within this area here. First up, this region at the top couldn't break through, came back in somewhere as close as possible within here. I don't know, when was this? Was this Wednesday? When I know most of the markets really moved.
Yeah.
So that was Wednesday. The market came back in within here. The buyers showed up. We're expecting maybe to get the pullback coming in. I think we had put this one here during one of the live trading sessions. But unfortunately, we couldn't get the market pulling back in because we were expecting to possibly see that. But unfortunately, the market just completely took off to the upside. So this week, we're going to be waiting to see if we can ever get the pullback coming in within or possibly the market giving us some sort of a probe, maybe an attempt to break to the downside, which ends up being unsuccessful. Then we'll try and see whether we can resume our buying opportunities somewhere within this region here. So you could watch out for that. On the flip side, if the pullback comes in deeper, there's a possibility price could be coming back in within this area. You can see that the market really broke free of this area. There was an aggressive move to the upside, which means that this move going up is definitely something that's quite visible on the bigger time frame. So it's not uncommon to find the market coming back in within this region and possibly giving a really good buy somewhere within that particular region right there. So definitely a region where you could be watching out for. Remember that on the way up, just make sure that you manage your trade somewhere within that region, because it's not a guarantee that price is going to get past that region. So make sure that you watch out for those two scenarios right there. Hopefully we'll get some good moves on the card this week, just like they were last week. And hopefully this week at least we'll get some pullback coming in, unlike last week. So that's pretty much it for the card pairs. So I think we can look at the last set of currency pairs. So over to you, Mitch.
Yeah, so as you can see, we've looked at the US dollar and the Canadian dollar pair. So we're going to do the same thing with the Swiss franc pair, let's say, matching them with the neutrals pairs. So starting off with the euro against the Swiss franc. Now, in this kind of pair, our bias was to look for selling opportunities. It still is the same situation this week. And you can see the Swiss franc did show a lot of strength last week. It seems that the pairs were running away quite aggressively. Remember, we did point out these three areas, wanting to see a breach and a pullback, showing us that the price was actually holding below. But it seems that the price just continued running away, continued grinding all the way to the downside. So that's okay. Ideally, the trade did manage to continue going down. But this week, the bias here is still to look for selling opportunities. So we have identified these three areas of interest where we could potentially look for some selling opportunities or at least do some sort of trade management. So right now, we can see the price has given us a sort of pullback, but you can see how aggressive the buyers are coming. We do want to see whether or not this price is actually going to hold within this particular area. So if we do see the price coming back, or at least giving us some sort of probe, at least maybe inciting a few more people to look for the buys, I think there we might end up finding a very nice selling opportunity. Don't start looking for those sells now, especially with these buyers who are coming in. So there is a possibility this would be a situation, or at least a scenario. It could end up, or at least if you do find the price actually breaching this area to the upside and holding above. So you can see we're expecting it to potentially go up, but if you do see it holding above, we could see the prices pulling back all the way to this particular support and resistance area before we do see those selling opportunities coming in. So right now, the buyers are the ones who we do want to make sure that they're finished or fully completely finished. And now if we're able to get the price coming down lower, because you can see we're within a very major buyers area, and you never know, since it's the market, you could see last week, the prices just continued grinding down lower and running away from us. So if we are able to see the price managing to come down, reaching this area to the downside and holding below, I think we should be able to continue looking for those selling opportunities. Now, in terms of the next location of where the price could end up going to, it seems that this market is within a very strong buyers area. At least you can see we've tested this location before. So if we are going to go down lower, I think the next problem area seems to be within this particular location, an area of support also that turned into resistance. So going back to the 4 hour, I think if we do get the price breaching and holding below, you can end up watching out for this next price at around 95 or 0.95544. So that's the game plan. Right now, don't necessarily be too excited thinking a pullback has come in. Let me look for the sells. Look at how the sellers came in and how the buyers came in. So we do need to make sure these buyers are completely taken out before we are able to look for those sells. So looking at the next Swiss franc pair, we do have the British pound against the Swiss franc, brand new entry on our watch list. And in this situation, our bias here is to look for selling opportunities. So we do have these three areas of interest that we'll be looking at, especially looking for those sells, since we can see the market did end up giving us a pullback and managing to come down, breaking this support and resistance area to the downside, making a new low where it does seem to be struggling to breach this area to the downside. So right now, the fact that we're within a buyer's area, even though we do want to sell, we never want to sell within a buyer's area. We could end up seeing these buyers giving us a pullback, because clearly the fact that the price has given us some sort of pullback, attempted to come down low and has not breached this area to the downside yet. Because remember, this is an active candle, so we don't know yet. If we do see the price holding and we manage to actually get more of a pullback, could end up seeing the price coming back, inciting a few people to look for the buys, especially once it breaks to the upside. All the breakout traders there get stopped out, and we would end up looking for the selling opportunity once we do see the price holding to the downside. Now, there is also the possibility, because the fact that the price has not yet actually taken off, or at least taken up from this particular area, could end up finding the sellers are still very strong. And if we do see them managing to break that area to the downside, we should be able to continue looking for selling opportunities. But remember, we don't want to see something very small to the downside. We want to see a proper breach where the price really does go, because on that pullback, at least that would give you some good risk to reward, even if you end up targeting the next low that the market got to. But if the low is just all the way until here, such a trade will not necessarily give you some good risk to reward, and it's not necessarily very convincing in terms of the sell. So just watch out for that on the British pound against the Swiss franc. As we move on to the next Swiss franc pair, which is the Australian dollar against the Swiss franc. Now, brand new entry on our watch list, and on this kind of pair, our bias here is to look for selling opportunities. So we do have these three areas that we will be watching out for. So right now, you can clearly see where we are at. We are within an area where there are buyers. So we don't want to look for any selling opportunities just yet. This price could potentially end up breaking this area to the downside, but we're not too sure, because remember, we did point out is an active candle, and this candle right now will be closing in around 37 minutes. So you can be patient to wait to see what ends up happening. if you do see the price actually able to break this area to the downside, and if the price actually gives us a pullback, the price holds below, we should be able to continue looking for those sells. But watch out for the other Swiss franc pairs. You can see we've looked at the British pound against the Swiss franc, but within this area. So if you do also see this one reaching to the downside, you can also end up having a look at the other one to get confirmation. If you do see all of them doing that, that gives you more emphasis on your trade, or at least give more weight on your trade actually working out for you to be able to look for those sells. Now, remember right now, we do want to get confirmation. A lot of times this is what happens. It looks like the price is reaching to the downside, and you find the price actually ends up probing, coming back up. So we would end up looking to see if we could end up getting possibly a better price than this area, but it might end up coming back up, maybe even coming back to challenge this seller. And if we do see those sellers reacting and the price holding below, then we should be able to also look for selling opportunities just at that point in time. But right now, let's wait to see what ends up happening on the Swiss franc pairs, whether or not they'll still continue showing that strength, or we will actually start getting a pullback at the beginning of the week, then the trade moving at the middle of the week. So hope that's clear. The game plan on the Australian dollar against the Swiss franc. As we move on to the next Swiss franc pair that we do have, which is the Swiss franc against the Japanese yen. Now, in this kind of pair, we did have this pair last week, and our bias was to look for buying opportunities. Remember, we did point out these three areas where the buying opportunities could work out from. Now, you can see in this situation, we were within a buyer's area. We did mention that these buyers could end up reacting, taking the price up higher. But if this level did not react, we could end up seeing the price coming down lower. You can see these buyers wasn't good enough, or at least to take the price up higher, so they needed a better price. Price managed to come all the way down within this particular area where we were looking for the buying opportunity. You can see in this situation, we did work out on Wednesday, as most trades did. And you can see the market did manage to continue going up higher, and we're back within the seller's area at the top. So since our bias here is to look for buying opportunities, there is a possibility, since the fact that we are still respecting these same areas that we did have, we could maybe enter into some sort of range, bouncing between these two major levels. So we do have the bottom of the range right here, because you can see the price has bounced off these levels multiple times. So you could end up either finding the price coming down lower, giving us a pullback, something similar to what we saw last week, before we do see the buying opportunity coming in. But alternatively, since the way the price did manage to go up, we could end up finding that this level right here that we did have could be good enough within this particular area. So if we do see the price giving us a probe within this location, then we should be able to look for those buying opportunities within this particular area. But right now, the fact that we're within a seller's area, we could end up seeing something similar to what we're hoping last week. So you can see this seller's area has really held the market. So the Swiss franc pairs, as we've seen all of them showing a lot of strength, and they're within sellers' areas, or at least problem area. So if you do see them all breaking the area to the upside and holding above, then we should be able to continue looking for those buying opportunities on the Swiss franc against the yen. But just watch out for that. Remember, in this case, the Swiss franc is the base currency. That's why we're looking for buys, and we're within a seller's area. But if you realize, all of them are correlated because they're all within areas where buyers. So just watch out for certain problem areas like that. So last but not least, we do have the New Zealand dollar against the Swiss franc. Now, in this kind of pair, our bias last week was to look for selling opportunities. Remember, we did point out these three areas where the sells could work out from. Initially, when we were discussing this price earlier during the week, or at least at the beginning of the week, the price was within a buyer's area. We did point out these buyers could react, giving us more of a pullback. And if we did get that pullback, we would have been able to look for a selling opportunity at the top. But we can see the price did manage to actually break this area to the downside. And we can see on the pullback, the price actually held below, managing to actually come down low. And this ended up happening on Tuesday, so earlier during the week. But at the middle of the week, we can see the price did give us a pullback. And on Friday, around Thursday or Friday, we did get another opportunity to end up looking for a selling opportunity on the New Zealand dollar against the Swiss franc. So today, the bias here is still to look for selling opportunities. We will be focusing on these three areas right now. So right now, as you can clearly see, we're back within a very strong buyer's area. You can see how many times the price has approached this area, and we have gotten some sort of reaction. But the fact that the last time the price was here, you can see the reaction only got towards this area. And this, remember, it's a Swiss franc pair. It's within an area where there are buyers. And remember, we're looking for sells. So these buyers could end up still giving us some sort of reaction, potentially coming back within this area before we do end up looking for the selling opportunities. But be aware, since all of them could look as if they are potentially about to breach. So if you do see all of them breaking these areas to the downside, you can be able to wait for those pullbacks to look for the selling opportunities, especially if the price falls below. So we will be watching out for that. It seems that the next problem area for this pair does seem to be within this location. It seems this is the lowest point that the price has gotten to for a very long time. So just watch out for these particular areas. But for right now, do not jump in on those selling opportunities. But at the same time, don't jump in on the buys because the sellers still look as if they're strong. So wait to see what ends up happening with that Swiss franc correlation. So that's it for all the currency pairs. As you can see, we mix and match the sell pairs and the buy pairs with all the pairs that are on the neutral side. So in terms of fundamentals and things to watch out for, if you've noticed, a number of pairs end up moving either Tuesday, on Wednesday, some of them on Thursday. But if you realize and if you take note of the times, it's when there are high impact news that do end up coming out. So news events do end up helping, at least giving you an idea of when the trades could work out. So just watch out for this timing. So this is our watch, or at least the news events for this week. So we have filtered out when we only put the high impact news that we will be looking at. So today there's a holiday in Japan. So you can see tomorrow we do have some high impact news during the US session. So watch out for that time. We could end up finding some volatility then. On Wednesday, we also end up expecting a lot because you can see we have some CPI news. Remember the CPI news, well, what brought in that lot of volatility last week, and that was for the US dollar alone. In this case, we have it for the British pound as well as for the euro. So it could end up being some big movements coming in, especially for these pairs that we've looked at within one of these times. So take a note of Wednesday as well as on Thursday. You can see during the US session as well. As long as you take note of this and you do find the prices are within certain areas, you might find that this price has pulled back. It's within a problem area right here where we've gotten a probe, and you find that that ends up being on Wednesday before the news event comes out. That will give you more emphasis that your trade could end up working out. So just watch out for certain situations. So I guess that is it from me and all the pairs. Unless John, are there any questions or queries that?
No. Before we even look at the questions, I'm only seeing one. It's a comment. Something interesting about the CHFs, real quick. CHF yen, I think it's the highest it's ever been. I think we figured that out since I think you go to the daily CHF yen, I think since 1978 or since the beginning of time. I think it's the highest price that the market has actually ever gotten to. You can even see that it actually broke that to the upside. I think for the other one, I think was the DCHF, the one that's really gone down. It's never even gone up ever.
Yeah.
The chart began. Yeah. Dinosaur age. Interesting.
Yeah. So
data.
Perfect. Right.
It's been coming down the whole time. And right now we're more or less at the low. I think it's the region where you're saying the lowest price that the market has ever gotten down until.
Yeah.
Interesting times for the CHF.
Yeah. Market have just spiked, but been interesting the way they've just been going down. Or at least showing us a lot of strength at the moment. So
yeah. Interesting times. So I think past those regions, either to the downside or the upside, we're basically flying blind. We don't even know where to end up targeting. All right. So I see Alan Ronald there saying, hi, John and Mitch, thanks a lot. Good to see you, Alan. Always happy to see you here. So you're gaining a lot. So I'm not really seeing any more questions. But guys, remember, the good thing about it is, at least this is not like the daily analysis. So you can watch and rewatch this analysis. It's going to be up on our YouTube later on today. So at least for the remainder of the week, you can definitely end up referring back to it. So make sure that you also hop on there. If you're not subscribed, make sure you do. Make sure you like the video. Make sure you turn on that bell notification, and make sure that you also do end up commenting and sharing if possible. And at least the information that we're giving you, at least it has a couple of days before it does end up expiring. So at least just make sure that you can just end up referring back to that. So it should be up there later on today. Remember, we also have the intermediate tomorrow. So for the guys who want to join in, if you missed out on the last session last week, still feel free to come in for tomorrow's session. It's okay. Also make sure that you do end up bringing in a friend. Tomorrow we're going to be looking at quite a number of things, buyers and sellers regions, starting on entries, and so many other things. So just make sure that you also do come down for that if you can. Scope Markets offices, Westside Towers on the 4th floor from 4 to 6 p.m. So you can make sure that you do join us for that as well. So I guess that's pretty much it from me. Mitch, unless you want to add anything, I think I'm good.
Pretty much it as well.
All right. Guys, we'll see you guys in the next episode next week. So happy swinging. May the fish be with you.
Yes, guys. Bye.